Hello everybody and welcome to the Mad Science Lab, where we're here to do our set review of Kaladesh for the Canadian Highlander format. I'm Alasdair and this is Nick, and we're ready to dive right in and do some mad science. So we're starting off with Toolcraft Exemplar, a 1-drop, 3/2. There's a few cards in the set that reward a really aggressive artifact deck.
Now, we've done quite a few set reviews over the years, and every time I say, here's yet another card for the white-red aggressive artifact deck. It may or may not splash blue. And I think definitely I'm making the call. This set, it's over the edge. These cards are so aggressive and so strong in that deck.
You have Metalcraft. This is a 3/2 first striker.
It's
1 mana.
It's just bonkers. And I know it's just one card, but it's been building up for a long time, and I haven't seen anyone... Well, there's been a couple of people attempt it.
Yeah, well, let's see someone try to build it.
Yeah.
So, we had a conversation recently about which Wraths you play in a non-black and a white control deck. And once you get past, Wrath of God,
Day of Judgment. Maybe you've got access to blue, you've got Supreme Verdict. Maybe you don't, though.
Yeah, and then after that, the cutoff, you have to go up to 5 mana Wraths, and
Hallowed and Rout are the next best ones, and there's debate about whether you'd rather prevent them from having their...
Those are all very marginal advantages.
Oh, yeah.
Gaining, 5 life seems like a pretty reasonable...
Even if you're just gaining 3 life, okay, they overextended just a little bit, pressure's too much, you gain 3 life, that's actually a bolt to the face. Gaining 3 life is 1 card advantage against a red aggressive deck. That's huge.
And sometimes you'll be wrathing a tokens board or something and gaining a crazy amount of life. It definitely seems like the best upside on 5 mana wraths we've seen so far. So there's a whole cycle of these Gear Hulks.
Yeah. The blue one is my favorite.
Absolutely. Blue one actually allows you to... Okay, you can't Snapcaster a Ponder, preordain a Mana Leak for as cheaply, but sometimes you Snapcaster a Cryptic Command, and this lets you do that for the same mana. Easier on your mana, actually. But you also get a 5/6. I'm not gonna... I think someone would be foolish to categorically say that this is better than Snapcaster, but it has trade-offs.
Yeah.
It can fulfill some of the same functions, and it does so on a much larger body.
There's a slight issue that Snapcaster oftentimes comes down on turn 2 as a surprise blocker and kills a creature, but that's got to be counterbalanced with the fact that these decks are often blue control decks that play stuff at instant speed are often short on win conditions, and this is legitimately can win the game.
Yeah.
At a certain point. So.
Do we thought, while we're on the Gear Hulks, since this is the one Gear Hulk that we brought up, what are our thoughts on the other cards in this cycle?
The red Gear Hulk is a trap. Read it a few times, read it as many times as you like, but actually play a deck with red and try and find a place where it goes in. It doesn't work. It's not going to do what you want it to.
It's not quite Inferno time. The green one is a pretty great 5 mana aggressive card, but the aggressive green decks don't play 5 mana creatures.
Yeah, the reason why you're having trouble thinking of a better 5 mana green aggressive creature is not because they aren't out there. They actually are. It's just that nobody plays them because 5 mana is not a good mana cost for an aggressive creature.
The last time you saw Wolfear Silverheart.
Wolfear Silverheart is a way better card. Nobody plays it.
I've seen some excitement about the black Gear Hulk, and I just don't understand it at all.
That's it's just not at the right pace for Highlander, honestly.
I mean, maybe if you're planning on putting it in a deck where you just don't pay for any of your cards, then it's better than Shriekmaw because you can kill anything. But it's worse than Grizzlebrand.
Yeah.
So.
And the White Gear Hulk, it's not actually going to disrupt their game plan. Don't think that they're going to be totally thrown off kilter by having to keep a creature, an artifact, and a planeswalker. In fact, many decks are trying to precisely set up a board where they've got a good creature, a good artifact, and a good planeswalker.
Some of the time, you'll get some good value off it. You'll hurt an aggro deck. I'll have to sacrifice 2 planeswalkers. But it's not like other cards like Cataclysm that have seen play in Highlander because it leaves their lands alone.
Yes.
So
and it's not consistent.
You're leaving them with the best 3 or 4 cards they have in play.
So I've recently come upon an addiction for 2 to 3 mana blue creatures that can block all day. Now Glint-Nest Crane can't necessarily block all day. It's only got 3 toughness, not the critical number of 4, but it has a power, and it has flying, which is actually huge. My walls can't block flyers. It's so annoying. Flyers is how my planeswalkers die in blue control decks.
Yep.
Now, this doesn't cantrip in every control deck. So, if you've got an artifact-based combo deck or an artifact-based control deck, and you're looking at that whole category of cards, there's 4 or 5 decent cantripping blue creatures, and some of them are white and one of them's green. This is a really real contender.
Yeah, and if you're not playing artifacts, if you have like a couple of mana rocks, then don't waste your time.
Don't waste your time. Okay.
So Nick, you have been a strong proponent of Jace's ingenuity in the face of some criticism from the
Right.
community.
Well, so there's this thing where either you're okay with tapping out and your whole blue deck is just okay with that, and that's the thing you accept, and you don't play that many counterspells, just a critical number. Or you don't like tapping out, and compulsive research actually is really painful to cast on your turn. And people still play compulsive research because it's great card advantage. It's just really nice to be up, to draw 2 cards, a divination with some sort of upside. They play Think Twice. Think Twice is a real card in those decks that just can't play compulsive research as their divination. But
I can see the comparisons between this and an instant speed compulsive research.
That's what I'm getting at here. They both end up giving you 2 cards in hand, and they give you some sort of selection. Compulsive research lets you kind of discard this land. It gives you an extra card to compensate. And this lets you scry 2, and it's kind of like...
You just kind of put that the land on the bottom right away.
You can just put the land on the bottom. Make that comparison. Think about that next time you're putting compulsive research in a deck. And instead, would you be willing to pay 1 more mana extra to never have to tap out? That's a big deal.
Also, it gives you 2 energy.
You're excited about this one, huh?
Demon. So,
tell us.
I get that Massacre Worm isn't playable in all the Highlander decks. In fact, I don't see a lot of decks playing it. But in a deck like mine that can ramp to the expensive black costs, is playing a control game, the ability to wrath the board against the small decks is just so... Massacre Worm is the bane of so many decks I have to play against. And the life loss of Massacre Worm is really nice. Sometimes you can just straight up kill people. Demon's a little worse in that regard. It hits all your creatures too. It can't just flat out kill your opponent. But it's got this other sweet ability to reanimate things, and it's also just a 5/5 flyer. Massacre Worm often just hits for 2 every turn because your opponent blocks it and they just lose 2. A 5/5 flyer is really good. So I don't know that I would say that this card is better than Massacre Worm, but I think if you are playing a deck, if you're me and you're playing a deck that runs Massacre Worm, this is totally considerable as a second copy. I'm definitely going to play it. Talking of cards that I'm going to play, this is not one of them.
Who's excited about this card? Okay, read it again. Read it a few times. Really, is this ever going to get you any value?
It basically kind of casts Impulse when it comes into play, except you have to get one of your opponent's cards, which is almost certainly going to be worse than getting one of your own cards. If this was a 1/3 Death Touch for 2 mana, I'd be interested in it. It would be kind of like Agent of Bolus.
Even if this just impulsed your own library, it wouldn't be playable. But the fact that it impulses your opponent's library, big drawback.
This thing costs 2 mana too much. No. And you're never going to get good... The number of times where you're going to get get your opponent because they played a tutor or they have Future Sight in play or something, it's just...
No.
They're so marginal.
We got a 4-ability Planeswalker. It's always nice. First, right off the bat, my initial judgment of this card, it hits the board and it defends itself without going to 0 loyalty. It's got a -3 that kills the threat that's threatened to kill it next attack step. That's huge for me. That already makes me want to play this card.
And I looked at it and compared it to Outpost Siege, which I know a lot of the big decks play. And this gets to do that every turn. And the card turns into a shock if you don't want it. Her first ability seems pretty good just by itself.
Yeah.
I don't think that she goes in every red deck. I know a lot of
Yeah.
people are getting excited about her.
People are comparing it to Sulfuric Vortex, and that's a mistake.
Yeah, if you're playing a really aggressive, low curve deck, Chandra's going to come down and deal 2. And then deal 2.
Mm.
And then maybe deal 2, but, you could probably have done all that damage in one card, 2 mana, 3 mana.
Yeah, play it in your slower red decks. And do play it in those red decks, it's good, but it's got to be just the right deck.
Yeah.
We got another Boggart Ram gang.
Yeah, I mean, it's not a goblin, but it's slightly easier to cast. Wither
Yeah.
never mattered in that thing. Just another ram game.
Sure, yeah. So this is this effect that they've been doing. This is pushed to its logical extreme.
Mm-hmm.
This is the best version of it I think they've ever done.
Yeah, it's quite good. And also, I just really love that we started to get some red cards that are showing emotions that aren't angry and breaking things. I'm really hoping we see more of this kind of flavor from red in the future.
Okay, so there's been talk about pairing this with Platinum Imperium.
Yeah, if Platinum Imperium is the only artifact in this deck, for 4 mana you get a Platinum Imperium into play, and then you don't take anything.
I think we can all agree that playing no other artifacts in your deck is a huge drawback in Highlander. But Madcap Experiment is a 2-card combo with any tutor that puts an artifact on top of your library. So cards that do that include Worldly Tutor, Enlightened Tutor, Vampiric Tutor, as well as some of the more obscure ones. I don't know if there's a combo deck in here. You can have any artifact in the game for 4 mana. What would you have?
It's kind of a tinker
Or
that
5
requires
mana.
tinker. It's not points. It requires a lot more setup.
Right.
Is that setup worth it?
Probably not. But it's a new component for your red artifact decks. Think about it.
This is another card that goes along with the first card that we mentioned. It's a cheap aggro artifact based creature.
1 mana 2/3 super real.
Yeah. What's this card's nickname? Nerd Egg. Planeswalkers.
Right. Yeah. Nissa gets to strut her stuff. This is real business.
Yeah, so Nissa World Waker has seen play in Highlander. And her 2 modes are Untap Forests or Animate Lands. And I think she's still good in the mono green ramp decks, but gets cut from a lot of other decks because she's just not quite good enough. And this one takes both of those abilities and combines them. Getting 5 mana for a 5/5 haste is quite nice. That's a legitimate threat against other planeswalkers and control decks.
And it's not just cost. That 5/5 can block.
Yeah, yeah. She can defend herself quite nicely. Her -3 is highly relevant. Get back another planeswalker, get back a creature. She's got a lot of versatility on her. And she can ultimate the turn after she comes into play. Now, that being said, I don't think her ultimate is so good that you want to default to doing that. I'd rather plus her a couple of times and then keep her around.
Sure.
But this is Highlander. We play fetch lands. We play all kinds of things. Her ultimate will draw you a lot. She's a highly versatile planeswalker, and I definitely look forward to having her see play.
Yeah. So, Vines of Vastwood sees occasional play.
Yep.
This is half of Vines of Vastwood for half the mana.
Also, Ranger's Guile has seen play, and this is just strictly better than that.
Sure. But where this really shines, in my opinion, is in the Infect deck.
Yeah.
And Infect is really, really excited to have this. And actually, I think 2 or 3 other pump spells in this set are particularly good for that archetype.
Yeah, there's the 2 mana +4/+4 and Trample as a sorcery. I don't know that most aggro decks are super excited about that, but Infect.
And then there's a red one that gets Menace.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that the Infect deck plays red.
Maybe.
But, there's
Anyway.
good pump spells.
Yeah.
Attack with your Infect creatures. So this card has a lot of text on it, but, don't worry about it. Basically, she says, the first spell you cast each turn, draw a card. And maybe you get to cast it for free. But if not, yeah, you can draw a card.
I don't think it's good. I mean, even if she was just 4 mana for 2/3, draw a card at the beginning of your upkeep, I don't think I'd play that. It's 2/3, it's just too fragile. The fact that you have to cast a spell to get the effect.
Yeah,
You're
be.
thinking living the dream, cast a spell on your turn and on their turn. That'll never happen. No, don't. It's unrealistic. I think Rashmi is looks like you're going to think about the scenarios where you're going to draw a million cards, but actually she's going to die to a lightning bolt, and you're going to be down 3 mana worth of tempo. Sorry. Now, when I was talking about playing walls, the cantrip, I was trying to contain myself. A 1/3 flyer for 2 that lets you lets you
Draw a card.
Yeah. Well, look at the
Impulse.
top 4. Impulse, yeah. That's exciting to me. But the potential to be on turn 2, not just preventing damage, but actually gaining life against an aggro deck. And scrying. Late game, this comes down against a control deck. You're still excited to see Contraband Kingpin. Now, I get it. This is only going in artifact-heavy decks. But every artifact-heavy deck that plays blue and black that isn't already 100% game win percentage against aggro is windmill slamming Contraband Kingpin. This is my pick for best card of the set.
Whoa!
Now, I know, in certain scenarios, in a deck building sense, it's subtle. It's subtle. It's not the most powerful, but it's the best.
All right. Nick's favorite card in the set.
Yeah.
Um,
This is a solid attacker.
there are several of these energy-generating creatures in the set. We haven't talked about all of them.
Sure.
Some of them might...
The
They
thriving
compete
creatures.
with... But
Yeah.
there's a lot of cards that just come into play, you immediately spend their energy for their effect,
Sure.
and that is good enough together. This is one of those, it actually gets to generate 2 uses of itself.
Mhm.
And a 2-mana 3/2 is like close to being good enough already in
Mhm.
the green-red aggro decks. And
As a control player, the idea of a 2-mana 4/3 trampler, I can't survive 2 attacks of that.
I mean, it only gets to do it twice, but after that, you're probably close
That's
to being
enough.
dead anyway.
Yeah,
so.
definitely. I find this a little disappointing.
Yeah, I mean, it certainly does all the things that you want a Planeswalker to do. It defends
Yeah,
itself.
Defends
It
itself.
draws you cards. It helps
Draws you cards.
recoup the life against aggro. I mean, I can't imagine a scenario where this comes into play and your opponent doesn't want to at least try to kill it. I don't think that it should be underestimated because a Planeswalker that can consistently defend themselves this way. I mean, we've seen Baby Jace,
Yeah.
Architect of Thought,
Yeah.
muck up combat. Liliana Last Hope has done a lot of mucking up combat, but he costs 4 mana, so I don't know. I'm not.
It's dicey. I think I'll play it, but might not be still in my decks in a year from now.
Yeah.
It's borderline.
And the emblem is quite disappointing, in my opinion, for an emblem.
Yeah.
It doesn't deal with a lot of problems.
No. Saheeli.
Yeah.
What'd she do, though? Okay, 3 mana. That's cheap. We're comparing her to a whole other class of Planeswalkers.
Yeah.
We're comparing her to...
And we're going to be comparing her unfairly to some of the best Planeswalkers in the game, because Liliana the Veil is really pushed at 3 mana.
I think more like Jace Beleren, which is a marginal Highlander card. Every once in a while it'll pop up in a deck here or there.
And I think it's worth noting that if you're playing a deck, and I don't know what deck this is, but if you're playing a deck that wants to cast Heat Shimmer, copying an artifact or a creature until end of turn, I mean, that you get tons of good value off her here. I don't really know what deck that is, but if you want her -2, it's very fairly costed to leave behind a Planeswalker.
She's a weird card, but yeah, don't think of her... That's a good way to put it. Don't think of her as a 4-mana Planeswalker that's a little cheaper but doesn't do anything. Think of her as a sorcery that has a lot of value attached. If you want that sorcery. Yeah, that's a good way to put it. All right. Well, if you wanted a playable vehicle, this is it. This goes in the flying aggressive decks for sure.
So if I can I'm having a difficult time conceiving of how good vehicles are. So I'm kind of trying to think of them as equipment.
Oh, interesting. I like that.
So imagine that this is an equipment that goes on a 1 power creature. You can't fly your enormous thing through. But you put this on a 1/1 or whatever, and it has equipped creature gets +2/+2 and flying, and when it attacks, you can draw a card from loot. Like our equipped creature becomes a 3/3.
Well, really, we can reduce this to say equipped creature. Yeah, it becomes a 3/3, no matter what its size.
Yeah. The equipped creature becomes a 3/3 flyer, and when it attacks, you get the loot. Okay, that's not sword level good, but that's not bad.
2 mana, free equip.
Like a free equip.
Yeah,
that's pretty good.
I think it's playable.
Yeah. Seems
I'm
good.
excited.
Seems reasonable. This is just a good card to go in the black aggro decks. There's a double black creature that already does this. It's just worse. It's a 3/1.
Yeah, it's definitely going into mono black.
Yeah.
It's also possibly going into Grixis or Jund aggro decks. Weird aggro decks with 3 color or more that find themselves tight on mana.
Yeah, it's very easy to cast, and 2 mana 3/2 is fine, and this one's pretty easy to get back. So, yeah. So, Nick and I had a discussion about whether or not we thought that this card was worth an inclusion. So we spent about 30 seconds brainstorming if you could have an infinite combo, and we already came up with one 2-card combo. I've already thought of another one since then.
Oh, yeah.
I'm sure if you give this card some thought, you will think of lots of combo potential. So we're not going to tell you what we thought of, but we'd like to hear what you thought of.
This card, has...
Nah, that being said, I don't really think you want to play this card just for value.
Ooh.
Like, pure value Panharmonicon is like...
No, even Rings of Brighthearth you can't really play just for value. You have to have a concrete plan.
Yeah.
Panharmonicon has some very concrete plans.
Yeah.
You'll find what to do with it. Right, so this card... It looks like the value payoff is very exciting. But is it?
So, yeah, in order to be able to use this, you need to be able to have no cards in hand.
And you need to be sure your opponent isn't getting more value off of it than you.
So I could see this being played in a very low to the ground kind of burn style aggro deck that has very few high drops, but wants to be able to replenish its hand very quickly, like a pure red burn deck. Those kind of decks are often struggling against the longer later game decks that you play this against a control deck, they draw a couple of 4 or 5 mana cards.
Sorry, I disagree. I think this is very comparable to a 4 mana Howling Mine, that it's very often going to backfire. Your opponent's going to get to draw cards before you, or you'll get stuck with a weird card in hand, and they'll blow up your lands, and it's just going to be a disaster. And half the time it's just going to sit in your hand, waiting around while you're busy with your mana, killing them. You're doing something.
Right. Right.
Bomat.
Do we agree that this is an interesting way to draw cards in an aggressive red deck?
Oh, it's interesting. It's good. I find this card very hard to evaluate, honestly.
Okay, so I'm imagining... so the worst possible case scenario with this thing is you draw it late game on an empty board. On a full board where it doesn't do anything. And assuming that you've already played out the rest of your cards because you're fast, you drop this, you attack with it, you resolve its trigger, and then you sacrifice it after it gets blocked. Which means that for 2 mana it's cycled. That's... okay, you had to discard your hand, but you're not doing this until you've played out the rest of your cards anyway. Worst case scenario, 2 mana cycle. That's not bad. Very reasonable scenario. You drop this on turn, 2 or something, and get attack in. You've exiled the card. Then your opponent plays a creature, and you can't attack with it anymore. You play out the rest of your hand, you attack, trigger, sack it, after blocks, draw 2 cards. And then it was basically like a red divination.
Well, picturing the scenario where I'm this control deck and I've got, Trinket Mage on the board, and you attack me with a 3/2 and your Bomat Courier, and I know you're getting value if I just let you get a second card under your Bomat Courier, but at this point I don't care. I just can't let your 3-2 survive, so I have to block the 3-2. And now Bomat Courier is going to be able to get in again next turn.
It does provide your opponent with a lot of difficult decisions. It represents a lot of potential value because you can sacrifice it at any time. Yeah, I think that this is definitely something that fast red decks that want to draw more cards should look at.
Very interesting.
All right, let's get down to business here. Vroom!
So we haven't talked about BattleBots yet in this review. BattleBots is a deck that plays with Mishra's fast mana, to put it gently. No, there's some broken ways to get a bunch of artifact creatures onto the battlefield real quick. Some of them have affinity, etc. And this plays really nicely with that deck.
I mean, 4 mana for a 5/3 trample haste is a little bit. It's not quite good enough if that's just what you're getting.
Mm-hmm.
But if you have any way to kind of magnify that advantage.
Pause right now. I'm going to plug in my computer here. A little bit cut. There's nothing that can be done.
That's all right.
Goodness, they look the same. They're really awful. You got that in?
There we go. Did you want to resync? Sure. So. Oh, it's so cute!
That is a cute card. So my immediate comparison is Kitchen Finks.
Yeah, and that's a reasonable, although perhaps slightly unfair comparison.
Right. Kitchen Finks is a busted card.
Yeah, something that's worse than Kitchen Finks is probably pretty fair. They both gain you 2 life. They both draw you a card when they die. Kitchen Finks,
the card it draws is a
2/1 that gains you 2 life.
Yeah, that's 0 mana, which is a great card.
Yeah, but I think so. Obviously, you never play this over Finks. Maybe you're in a situation where you think that your game against aggro is bad enough that you want both, but this is available to all the decks that would love a Kitchen Finks but aren't playing white or green. And if you can't play Kitchen Finks and want to, I think you should definitely look at this card.
Mm-hmm. So we have Ethereum Sculptor is the quick comparison for this one. And that's the same card, except it's 2 mana for 1/2, and it's blue. Now, I'm excited by the effect, but I can't think of a deck that doesn't have access to blue that wants this effect. And secondly, I can't think of a deck that wants this effect and wants a 3-power creature, wants to pay a premium for that. So,
I think that if you want this card in play, you don't care about its stats. You're looking to abuse its text box.
Right, but you're paying for its stats, unfortunately. Yeah. So,
but if there's an Ethereum Sculptor in play, you're only paying 2 for it.
This is just a functional reprint of Tendo Icebridge in Highlander, where energy is not going to be a big thing. So if you're playing Tendo Icebridge, you now have another. If you're not playing Tendo Icebridge, forget about this.
Well, here we go. We get the completion of the fast land cycle. Not much to say beyond that. Don't assume that this duel goes in every Highlander deck. Because the fast lands don't. You need to be playing in a fast aggressive deck. But if you happen to be playing a fast aggressive deck in any colors, there you go.
And our last card that we're reviewing here, Inventor's Fair, is very exciting. Okay, you're fine. This card is doing everything that the Artifact combo decks already want to do. It's staving off the aggressive decks, and it is creating more density by putting a spell effect on a land. So,
yeah, anytime you get a land that has an ability,
we don't even care how bad the ability is. If we could ever picture ourselves playing it, it's worth it.
Yeah, especially in an artifact deck where your color requirements aren't as strict. Yeah, no, if you're playing artifacts, this is a really good card you should play.
It's off the hook.
All right, well, there we go. That's Kaladesh. Thanks for listening.
Yeah, this is fun to do a little review. Be sure to comment your opinions if you disagree with us. We love the spicy conversation. And check out the CanadianHighlander.wordpress.com and the Facebook Canadian Highlander group for all the discussion opportunities.
Yeah, thanks for watching.